Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time popping in. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a whole lot of thoughts about the Tarot of a Witch's Garden by Sasha Graham with art by Natasha Alinsik. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'm so sorry. We're going to be talking about this. We're going to be diving into a lot of detail, so this is probably going to be a bit of a long one. I am going to take you on a card-by-card walkthrough of all of the cards and give all of my thoughts and impressions. And I do want to spend a good amount of time also on the guidebook, and I want to do a whole chit-chat about the cardstock. But I think it's going to be most effective if I show you the cards first and we go through those, and then I get into the guidebook, and then we do the deep dive on cardstock. Now, if you're not a nerd about cardstock like I am, you might not care about that bit, but if you've been hearing all of the buzz about the fact that this is different cardstock than Llewellyn's usual, then you may want to stay for that part. So now that we're good and zoomed in, let's just go through the cards card by card and just consider everything that we see here, because there's so much rich symbolism in this deck and it really, really excites me. So we're going to be going through them from the Fool all the way through the King of Pentacles. Let's get into it. So we begin with the Fool, and our Fool is, I think, really great. We've got the air symbol right on their chest, which is, in fact, I'm going to use my little wand to point. They have the air symbol right on their chest, which is a really great nod back to the fact that the Fool is associated with the element of air, which is very interesting. And we have the Fool heading right towards that cliff, but there's a lot of really traditional imagery here. We have the feather just tucked into their ear, their little knapsack slung over their shoulder. What I find really interesting about what they're carrying here actually is that there's a book clearly visible in their little pouch, right? But then also there's a book down here that's discarded on the ground, and I'm like, oh, that's so fascinating to me, because it sort of tells me that and they're carrying a book as well. So they're sort of consciously choosing the wisdom they're going to follow, if any. So there's a sort of intentionality around that I really appreciate, because I think a lot of times the Fool, it's easy to sort of pigeonhole them into being literally foolish. But here there's sort of a foolhardy approach to life, a zest for life. You know what? I know what I know, and I'm going to go with what, I'm going to focus on the stuff that I think is true, that feels right for me, and I'm going to head in that direction. Now, forgive me because my angle is a little different than I'm used to. It looks to me like there's a little fairy, and I don't know how well this is going to zoom in on this. It looks like there's a little fairy right here, sort of assisting a little bit. And it looks like they maybe even are tucking a little red rose and a little white lily into their satchel. And this person's not even seeing that, which I think is really great. So we have this lighthearted step. We're walking on this clear path towards a cliff, right? And especially this piece of rock here looks like it could just crumble underneath their feet. And they have their white dog companion. I mean, it's a brilliant Fool. I really like it, but it also is fairly traditional while still having these sweet little extras in it. Oh, and by the way, that's what our backings look like. Gorgeous sort of triple moon shape. We've got the cauldron here and this little sort of butterfly or moth design. We've got bats in the corners, which is a very interesting choice. Some wheat, a snake. Very, very cool. Very cool. Very witchy. So now we're on our magician, and we have a more feminine presenting magician here. I really like that we have this table where we can clearly see the astrological glyphs. You can kind of see that in the original Rider-Waite-Smith, actually, which is really interesting. We have the red roses and white lilies that we're used to seeing, and our magician is standing there with one hand pointed up this direction towards spirit or Kether, and then the other hand pointing down towards earth or earthly pursuits, Malkuth. And it's this idea of sort of the drawing down from above to what is on earth. So there's a manifestation energy to the magician that we see really present on this card, and I love it. I love that we have a little fox and cat on the card as well. There's this additional symbology. I really appreciate that the lemniscate here is being made up of the vines off of this rose bush. I think that's a really nice touch. It's worth pointing out as I go through these cards that I've already been working with this deck quite a bit since it came in. So mine's already got some signs of wear and some signs of use, which is fine with me. But these aren't really my first impressions. These will be my, like, I don't know, 8th or 10th impressions at this point. So here, I love this High Priestess. I really just, this feels very magical. She's got one foot in the water, sitting on this crescent moon. Again, very traditional. She's holding onto a pomegranate. She's got her scroll close to her heart, and it's sort of tightly rolled up and held very close. But we still get the veil, but the veil behind her is sort of being made up of these, like, almost like weeping willow fronds that are falling down behind her, blocking the view. And there's a little bit of fog as well, creating that sense of obscurity. I really like that. Our Empress has a pillow instead of a shield that holds the sign of Venus. There's a scythe here, which I really appreciate that symbol. It shows us that the Empress is willing to cut away if necessary. She's not just this sort of passive figure that I think sometimes she can get portrayed as. She's obviously very abundant here with a full ripening belly or womb. And we have this gorgeous setting. I mean, it's just beautiful. You really get the sense that there is so much intentionality with the way these have been illustrated. Her crown has, it looks like the right number of stars, which is such a silly thing for me to obsess about. But like, if you're going to put the crown of stars on the Empress's head, I feel like it should be 12 because it's meant to stand in for the zodiac signs. So I also love, again, we have a book. And that's a really interesting thing, actually. We get a lot of this. The High Priestess doesn't have a book, but she has the scroll. And the Magician doesn't have a book, but the Fool and the Empress both have a book. And I don't know why I like that. I think there's something there about characters that we maybe don't otherwise associate with, specifically with knowledge, get that association here. And I think that's awesome. The Emperor here has a ram question. Y'all know, okay, like, listen, if you're new to my channel, I apologize in advance for any attempts at animal identification that I completely slaughter, because it's not my forte. It's a running joke here. We all know it. There's some sort of bird of prey, falcon or otherwise. Maybe to me, it looks like a hawk or a falcon or something. And I like that our Emperor looks ready to stand up. His stone throne is sort of built into the landscape in a really cool way, which I just think this is a great card. I like all of them so far. I like that the staff of power that he holds is the actual Ankh that we're used to seeing, the Egyptian Ankh symbol that we'll see on other tarot decks. And instead of holding just a generic sphere of power, so to speak, not that they're all generic, but anyways, instead of holding a sphere of power, he's holding what looks to be a golden pomegranate. And hopefully there's not too much glare there and you're seeing what I'm seeing. The Hierophant, I love that the Hierophant is an older woman. I really like this crone vibe, and that she's sort of, she is still blocking the door. The Hierophant will traditionally be sort of the gatekeeper of knowledge in a lot of ways. Again, we have a little stack of books, and these look like children that really want to learn, and even like there looks like a little, a creature, a forest weasel, a mouse. I don't know. I'm already bashful about my animal thing. But anyways, there's a cat here. That one I know. And I just really like the vibe of this. It's like, yes, you can come into this garden, you can learn, but there's going to be rules. It's kind of what it feels like to me. This is such a tender lover's card. I love just a really sweet romantic lover's card for sure. It's not necessarily my favorite depiction ever, because I really tend to read the lovers more in a space of choice and commitment. But romance does work for that interpretation. And this is a really, really lovely, lovely image. It reminds me a lot actually of the Devil card, actually, Cernunnos, in the Druidcraft Tarot, where you have sort of these lovers that are clearly, you know, enjoying one another. And I like that. I like that a lot for the lovers card specifically. Here we have the Chariot, and this is the one that is associated with the sign of Cancer, which is my birth sign, my sun sign. So I'm always really curious to see what they do with this card. I really like that we have this very cozy, the canopy behind our charioteer here is holding all kinds of ripe fruit. There's even a little creature. It looks like a little like, I want to say like a little pan, but there's a little creature playing a pan style flute. I don't know what that's called, but they're doing that in the back. And you get this idea that like the work is being done, but there's also a place to go and also rest and be safe. So I really like that kind of combination of things happening here. The horses are pulling in two opposite directions. It's just a really lovely but classical Chariot card. This Strength card is so lovely. I love how this figure is kneeling or sitting down here and just really just dealing directly with this mama bear, but the baby bears are watching. And this is really interesting because to me, it's like, it's a reminder that when we're behaving in a way that is facing our inner demons, or we're doing something difficult and we do that in a tender, compassionate way, we are showing people around us that that can be done. And I think that's really special. And I just really like the fact that those little cubs are watching. I really enjoy this Hermit card. I almost prefer a Hermit card though that's got a more indoor space. It looks almost like she's just leaving the cabin rather than arriving at it or going into it. And I think I almost would prefer it the other way around, but this is a gorgeous image and I don't generally have any complaints about it. But yeah, I want to see her going inward or going into that building. But then again, as I say that and I look at this image, I'm like, her attempt to discover her solitude or to discover more about her inner self could be her going for a walk in the woods, and that's where her hermit space is. And so that's worth pointing out. Here we have the Wheel of Fortune. Now there is a misprint on this card that I've already played with. If you want to see what I did, then you'll want to check out my recent deck roundup for June. Yes. But these cards came misnumbered. So Justice just had the Roman numeral for 10 on it, and the Wheel of Fortune had the Roman numeral for 11. So I kind of used a gold pen to sort of blank out, sort of, you can see it, it's a little shiny there, but to blank out the I from the Roman numeral 11. And then here I added it with a little black fine point marker so that my cards can come out in the right order. They are incorrect still in the guidebook. It is what it is. It's a misprint. It'll be fixed on future printings, but it could be a while, and I wanted this deck right now. So that's what I did. Here we have, I'm wondering if these will show up later, but we have, oh, it's a fawn, here playing the flute. I wonder if that's what that was on the chariot, but I don't think so. I think the chariot was, like, it didn't have a human top half. So whatever that creature was. So here we have a fawn. There's a cat, I believe a wolf, a little boy, an owl. There's like a little fairy here. Really lovely. I like the lotus flower actually in the center of the wheel because to me that speaks to growth and learning. And we have a snake. So it's a beautiful wheel card. And what's interesting too is that this is a wheel that turns from the water that's pouring down on it from up above. And it's going to turn in this counterclockwise direction, which I think is really interesting. Here we have the Justice card, and we have on one side a basket full of fruits and produce, and then on the other hand, flowers and herbs and things like that, and yet they're balanced equally. So I like that because we're not trying to balance two things that are identical. To me, Justice isn't always about everything being exactly the same, and I think that that's represented here in a really lovely way. I also love how strong and confident the central figure here on Justice looks. This is such a blissed out hanged man. I mean, there's no denying that Natasha's artwork here is really, really breathtaking. It's got a really beautiful storybook quality. I love this kind of art. This is right up my alley. But I love that our figure here is sort of open-eyed but sightless, and this beautiful forest setting is just gorgeous. And I like that there's a pool underneath them because to me that is that little nod back to Odin in the well and coming up with the runes, which if you don't know that mythology, I would encourage you to look that one up. That's a really beautiful story. This death card, there's something about this that just gets me in the feels in such a way. So at first glance, what draws your eye is that we clearly have the figure of death here with their scythe, and there's a little girl who is handing up to death a little pumpkin, like as a gift, it looks like almost like, here you go, like appreciating death for what death does. Like there's a certain innocence and open-heartedness to the way this child recognizes that death is doing a difficult job, and you almost get this feeling like death doesn't get a lot of that kindness, doesn't get a lot of that understanding. I don't know why I feel very empathetic towards death in this card, but I think it's really beautiful. But in the background, you see the reality of death is still very, very difficult, right? We have a woman here who's grieving over a gravestone, and it's a sad image. There's this difficulty around death, but there's also something there around recognizing the importance of transition. And I think that this girl sort of recognizing that death is worthy of a gift is, I think, really meaningful and beautiful. Gosh darn it, this Temperance card is so pretty. Like, I cannot get over the art in this deck. It's absolutely gorgeous. So I love everything about this. It's really soft and soothing to look at, which I really enjoy in a Temperance card. I'm not going to lie, I'm a big sucker for weeping willow trees, and I feel like they're everywhere in this deck, at least in the majors. And I love the pink and purple tones. I mean, what else could I say? There's some, I think these are irises in the background. It's just a gorgeous image. I love that. This is really interesting to me, the Devil card, because again, oftentimes, I shouldn't say again because I haven't said it in this video, but oftentimes there's a link between the Lovers card and the Devil card. And so we have this sort of conscious commitment here to one another, to a life together that we see in Lovers card. And in the Devil card is when that sort of becomes something that's not creating freedom and goodness for them, but actually has become a prison of sorts. And so we're seeing that here and where the choices have left them. There's a cup of wine that looks like it's spilled here. And the two of them are sort of looking at each other. They're not looking up at this figure that's yanking their chain, right? They're looking at each other, and they're very hung up on each other in a probably like a toxic loop, right? You kind of get that feeling from this card. It's really powerful. This is one of the sweetest Tower cards. Tower is one of the difficult, it is arguably the most difficult card in tarot, although you could make a case for a couple of others as well, but it's a real difficult one, and it's a total upheaval and tearing asunder of everything you know and trust. And here you have some children being tossed out of their burning, kind of falling out of their burning playhouse, their tree house. And it's a devastating image with all this fire. But these sweet badgers, is that what they are, badgers? Yes? Or possums? badgers, those are badgers, are sort of holding out this blanket to catch them when they fall. And so there's this element of like, yes, you're falling and this really stinks that you're in this situation, but sort of there's this element of the universe has your back or the world has your back at the same time. Like there's some place soft for you to land, even though it's difficult. Oh, I love this star. I have no complaints. These are some night blooming flowers, and I forget what these are called. 4 o'clocks, I think they're called. They bloom at night. Night blooming flowers, you know, they're night blooming flowers. But we have a beautiful shooting star. I love the way that our central figure here is looking up. I like the way that she's pouring water from this jug and it's pouring over her fingers and like bathing around her feet. It's such a serene, calm, healing scene. And you almost get this feeling of like, finally, I can just have a moment to sort of recover. It's really, really beautiful. And I think this is a peahen, but I don't know that for sure. See previous comments about animals. And then we have the moon. This is such a witchy moon and it's yummy. I really love this image. I like to lean into the images I like to lean into the meanings about the Fool that have to do with sort of illusions, facing your fears and your self-doubt. There's a lot there that I like to lean into, but I also like to lean into an element of the moon card where you're really tapping into your inner wild. And that's what I sort of work with intuitively when I'm working with this card as a tarot reader with the wolf and the dog howling at the moon, which I really look for in a moon card. And so we have that here, but what I really love is how our central figure here is in the water and coming up along with these two little clawed lobster or crayfish type figures. And there's this idea of she's submerging, or she's rather emerging from the depths of her own subconscious with lessons learned and knows how to go forward. It's just a really great card. Yay for twinsies in the sun. I think this is great. It looks like an exact mirror image. And there's a sundial in the center. The children aren't naked, but they are very free looking. The only thing that's missing from this card for me is some indication that there's containment. I really like when the sun card, you can see a wall or some indication that there's safety for this kind of open-heartedness that happens in the sun card. So I kind of tend to look for that. I like the nakedness because to me, the nakedness speaks to the vulnerability of being in your absolute authenticity. And so there's the nakedness is very specifically a symbol I look for in a sun card because of that, because of the way that it means that for me personally. And I do, within that nakedness, I also like seeing the safety of a garden wall or some sort of surrounding. And that's, so like I said, that's the only thing kind of missing here for me. But I like the nod to the solar twins from older historical decks, and I just really enjoy this card. Judgment. This is interesting to me. It almost feels a little more like a 10 of Cups or 10 of Pentacles kind of feeling. It's like they're all waving at this angel who's kind of calling down at them, or this air spirit, or however you want to see that, that's kind of calling down at them. The piece that's missing here is the actual ascension. To me, there's not an immediate indicator that somebody's sort of leveling up, which is something I look for in a judgment card, but it's compositionally very, very close to the original Rider-Waite-Smith. It's just that instead of people coming out of tombs, we have all ages who are sort of lifting up their arms at this spirit in the sky. I really enjoy this world card. I have to admit, I love to see a world that does tie directly back to the Fool. Like, I love when we see the same character in the Fool as we see in the world, because I like that full circle moment for sure. But I do love this. I love that how free she is. We have another little fawn here, a cauldron. There's some tarot cards, which I think is fan-freaking-tastic down at the bottom. Again, we have a fairy, a child, a fawn, a cat. So the same characters that we saw in the wheel, if I recall correctly. Oh, I breezed past it. There we go. Yeah, a fawn, a cat, a fairy, and a child in the wheel as well. So yeah. So we have that mirroring to the Wheel of Fortune card, which is great. And now we're into the minors. So we're beginning with the Suit of Wands. We have the Ace of Wands. I love the serpent wrapping around this person's wrist. There's something about that that just feels, again, it's bringing in that witchy element. Even just the pointed style of the nails and the 3 little dots on the finger. It's like, yes, we're in witchy territory for sure. The Two of Wands, I really like this too, because you get the feeling like she is doing literal ritual work, literal magical work to scry as far as preparing for whatever it is that she wants to accomplish. So for me, the Two of Wands is all about preparation and planning and sort of considering possibilities. And I feel like scrying is such a beautiful representation of that. I think that's really lovely. And this, yes, when I did my recent deck roundup, thank you all who commented and solved this problem for me, but this reminded me of another deck called the Crystal Vision Tarot, which has got this very 90s fantasy art. This scene is actually one of the things I love about the Crystal Vision Tarot, but it was one of the only things that I really, really, really just loved artistically about that deck. And so I didn't end up keeping that one. So I'm so grateful to have this image because it's not like a copy of the image, but it's got a very similar feeling. And it's this feeling of sending out these beautiful little flowers that have flower boats or paper boats that have some sort of light in them. And this to me feels like almost like doing ritual around wishes or manifestation, where you're like, okay, I know what I want to accomplish. I'm going to send out my petition or my spell into the universe. I'm going to take tangible action towards my goal. And to me, this is like the first steps of really making a dream come true. And this feels really lovely to me because this is kind of what my process looks like. And I find myself getting almost emotional talking about this, but when I have a dream, something I really want to do that means something so much to me, which is a lot of times I think what the wand suit is all about. It's our pursuits. It's the vision that we want to pursue. It's the thing we are driven to do. It's more than just, I want a paycheck. You know, it's something meaningful to us. And when I'm going to do something like that, my first step is usually to do some kind of rituals, set some intentions, do some magic. Like I love really tangibly committing to that path in that way. And I see this in this card and I just think it's wonderful. I love that in the Four of Wands here, we have this almost masquerade ball looking thing, or maybe it's just this guy wearing a mask. I don't know. But you definitely get the feeling like you're at a celebration, you're at a party. What I love is the way that this character here is sort of coming forward towards us, the viewer of the card, and sort of beckoning us into the dance, so to speak. I think that's really great. Now, I like to see a little celebration in the Four of Wands because to me it's the milestone card. It's when we're celebrating something, some small accomplishment along the way to our bigger goal, and I love seeing that here. The Five of Wands. I love this whole, it's the early bird that gets the worm situation we got going on here. They're all fighting for food, but they're not like, there's no anger here, right? They're just, each of them is kind of focused on their purpose and their goal and what they're trying to get. And that's kind of a lot of times what happens in the Five of Wands is that you get this kind of clashing happening because everybody's just focused on what it is they're trying to do. And I think that's a great way to illustrate that conflict. So this is a glorious Six of Wands. I love that we have a female presenting figure here. She's got what looks to be some kind of scroll work tucked into this tube and it might not be. No, it's a tube. It looks like a rolled up parchment or map or something. And she's returning triumphant. The horse is rearing up. She's got the laurel wreath. The horse has, I'm guessing this is also laurel. I don't know. I'm not great with plant identification either. And she's being celebrated for what she's accomplished. I love that. These two compositionally, unfortunately for me, have a very similar feeling. And I need something slightly different usually here. I feel like this person needs to be, this looks like they're celebrating still. So this has a very jubilant kind of vibe. I'd be interested to see what the guidebook says, and I haven't read the whole thing through yet, but usually I like to see in the Six this idea of we've accomplished something and we're being recognized for that accomplishment. And then in the Seven of Wands, I'm looking to see somebody who's a little bit outnumbered, who's having to stand up for themselves or protect themselves, defend themselves in some way. And this looks, again, kind of similar compositionally to this. She looks like she's dancing, actually, and that they're like cheering for her. And I don't know that that's what it's supposed to be, but that's kind of what it looks like. So I'll have to remind myself when I get to this card, you know? Love this Eight of Wands. It's very easy for the Eight of Wands to just be very samey with 8 sort of wands shooting down the card. I love this. I love that she's sending the wands up, or perhaps she's receiving them from spirit. Either way, I love the way that this looks. And the Nine of Wands holding that line, holding that like last line of defense kind of feeling, really just sticking it out even though she's taken a bit of a beating here. And then the 10, she's managing her load quite well in this image. I almost wish the perspective was switched and we could see that she's almost to her destination instead of her coming towards us. But this really does work quite well. These, oh my gosh, the court cards. I don't even know. So this is like, I don't know what this creature is. I want to say it's like a fox, but it looks like it's made out of fire. And the ears, I don't know, is that a fox? But this is just a beautiful image. You get the idea that this character here is literally made of fire. She's like playing with a bit of molten like lava or something. I love this. The Knight of Wands feels very fiery, very dynamic. The horse also feels very dynamic with this sort of steam coming out of its nostrils. And like you can tell they're really like in the thick of battle or heading to it. The Queen of Wands looks straight ahead at us, which I love. We have the sunflower and a little black cat. Love it. Love the symbology. She seems to be sitting in a field of sunflowers. And I love these like sort of shooting sort of rays of flame coming out to the top of her head as if it's a crown, and the ball of fire she's managing. You really get the feeling that these could be elemental guardians, which I love. And then our King of Wands, whose fire is there, but it's much more contained. Like when you really see these, this is really interesting. You can see greater and greater control over the element, right? So the Page of Wands is like pure fire, pure exuberance, pure energy. And then we're still quite in the thick of that fire in the Knight of Wands. But by the Queen of Wands, it's starting to kind of be a little bit more manageable, a little bit more controlled. And by the King, it's this beautifully controlled flame here and these 3 rays of light or flame out of his head. I just think that's a really cool progression to see. So I want to show this card because this is going to matter later when we talk about cardstock, and I might forget which ones this has happened on. But you can see how hopefully you can see where you see this crease down the center here? What's happened here is that the linen, I think the embossing of the linen finish on here, yes, this is it. It's created a bit of a crease or a fold in the card, and I do have these on several cards throughout, and I have opinions about why I think that's happened, which I'll talk about, but I wanted to point it out while I had a good example up. The Ace of Cups is just gorgeous. I love me some lotuses in the Ace of Cups. That's a traditional symbol to see on the card. I love that we still have a bird sort of dropping something into the cup for us. There's these dragonflies. This is just a serene scene. We still have these very witchy hands. Love it. And the Two of Cups. To me, this does feel newer and fresher than it does in the Lovers, which is what I look for. I want to be able to see a difference between the Lovers card and the Two of Cups. I don't want them to look like they're both in the same state of their relationship, if that makes sense. To me, a Lovers card is a longer, it's a committed relationship. We've really built it up over time. It's like a life path we're choosing. Whereas in the Two of Cups, everything is still new and sweet and romantic. There's this sort of courting period. And I like to see that because the Two of Cups is all about those budding relationships, the newness, the freshness, the in some circles you might hear it called NRE or new relationship energy. That's what's happening in the Two of Cups. And then in the Three of Cups, loving the autumn, Halloween-y, celebratory vibes, but also this very like witchy, circling the cauldron kind of feeling. It's like you got apples to be bobbed for. They're having drinks. They look like they're having a grand old time. The leaves are falling. And I love that we have three frogs also partying hard down here in the lower corner. And one of them looks like they've passed out from partying too hard. And this is great because actually sometimes when the Three of Cups comes up, it is a warning not to go overboard with the partying, you know? Oh my gosh, we're almost half an hour in and we have so much to talk about still. Okay, so the Four of Cups. I think this is cute. We've got this character looks a little more sad than I would prefer. To me, the Four of Cups is about emotional stability. And unfortunately, when water, the element of flow and movement becomes stable, it can feel a little stagnant and can feel a little boring. It can feel like things aren't moving and happening as they should. And so you get this sense of like dreariness that can sometimes come through with the Four of Cups or malaise or ennui. And so that's what's happening with this little fairy under the mushroom. And there's another fairy that's like, hey, we can go have a good time. I've got something new and fresh for us to do. And they're so kind of in the doldrums down here that they're just not seeing it. This Five of Cups is really interesting. Normally what you'd see is this compositionally very similar to a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. We still have a bridge in the distance going off to a little safe haven here. But what's interesting to me, two things stand out. Normally we would see 3 cups, each with red fluid, like wine, coming out of them. But here, interestingly, one is green, one is red, and one is yellow. Now, if I was thinking about traditional witchy color associations, I'd think, okay, that's earth and fire and air, and water is what remains. And so there's something I can work with there as a reader. I love being able to dip into that symbology intuitively to go, oh, interesting. So she may have lost some material things. She may have lost a little passion. She may not be feeling like quite where she wants to be intellectually or mentally, but emotionally she's whole and she's okay. She's going to be okay, is I think the point. But most significantly to me about this Five of Cups is that instead of looking down at the 3 cups that have spilled, she's already looking over at the bridge. So she's in the process of making that transition from grieving over the 3 spilled cups to going to where that bridge is going to lead her for her future. It's a very hopeful interpretation. This is a super sweet 6 of Cups, and I love it. It's 2 little fairies. One of them is sitting on like a potato bug, and there's all these like little bugs, which is, I guess, great. I'm not a big bug fan, but this totally works because you get the scope of like, or rather the scale of how tiny they are All the cups have little flowers blooming out of them, just like you would see in a traditional tarot. And one of them is handing the other a little cup of flowers. I just think it's a super sweet image. And I like the sort of idyllic scenarios for this card. It really just hits the message home for me. Okay, I adore the Seven of Cups for so many reasons, but I think sometimes the Seven of Cups can get sort of boxed into being the card about making decisions. And I've certainly done that. I know that it's an easy place to go because there's all these cups with all these options. But oftentimes what's happening in the Seven of Cups is the options we're considering aren't even necessarily tangible. There's a lot of daydreaming. There's a lot of wishful thinking, a lot of trying to like pie in the sky or castle in the sky kind of thinking. And what I love about this is we have all the symbols here representing all the different things that she might be daydreaming about. But if you look at her up close, her eyes are closed. It's like she got interrupted doing whatever she was doing. It looks like she's repotting a lavender plant or something here. And she just kind of like paused, and she's clearly, her eyes are closed. She's looking up. She got lost in her daydreams. And I just think it's really beautifully and intelligently illustrated. It's just really, really well done. The Eight of Cups. These neatly stacked cups and the conscious turn away, and there's an eclipse in the sky. I mean, I got nothing. That's so good. It's just so good. And this is a card that most of the time before I buy a deck, if there's a way for me to see the Nine of Cups, I will look at it. This is one of my deal breaker cards, and I love this because too often it's just a person with a bunch of cups behind them, like they're just really into their wine. You know what I mean? I often say, oh, it's a dude with a bunch of wine. What I love about this is that we have this like water nymph, this idea that she's like maybe a river spirit, and she's in her river, she's in her element, things are good for her. Maybe she's somebody that comes by when people cross the bridge, and unlike a troll, I imagine she'd be somebody who would grant wishes. And it may even speak to that in the guidebook, but I'm not going to peek and cheat. I haven't read the entry in the guidebook for this card yet, but it really feels like wishes could be granted, but it also feels like gratitude and sweetness. And oh, I love it. I love it. And then we have the Ten of Cups, where we have this sweet little family. And I love that it's not your stereotypical white picket fence situation. Like it is, it's very idyllic, but it's idyllic in a unique way. And I love that. So we have the rainbow, we have all the cups. It's perfection on a card, which is what we sort of look for. And I look for anyways in the Ten of Cups. And let's see again if we see that elemental progression through the quartz. So we have the Page, who's like in the water, looks like they're a mer creature. And then we have the Knight, who's sort of in this swampy situation, still in the water, very much in it. And then we have a waterfall. So only her toes are dipping in the water, and the waterfall's behind her. And then we have the King, who's sitting on top. So we do see that slow mastery of the suit coming through, which I love. So here we have, as I said, the Page, very youthful impression here. This is such a storybook setting. I love it. This is probably my favorite card in the deck. It's one of my favorites. It's just so gorgeous. I love this sort of earthy, kind of seaweedy, almost like pony that's in the background. I love the flowing gown on this character. Though again, we're back to Weeping Willows. Can't go wrong. Like I freaking love it. It's so beautiful. And I love how the armor's been intentionally taken off from the waist to down. We're used to seeing this, right? In the Rider-Waite-Smith, we see a person riding a horse and their bottom part of their armor is like gone. Like they took it off. They took it off. And there's an intentional stripping down there, an intentional vulnerability. It's more vulnerable to have your lower armor removed than your upper in a lot of ways, right? A different kind of vulnerability, perhaps I'll say. But yeah. Here we have our Queen. I love how in the element she is and how serene and beautiful. Oh, she seems just lovely. And then our King, who sits on the surface of the water. We've got like just hints at the water underneath him. His throne is made of like little sea creatures and seaweed, and oh, so pretty. And that brings us to the sword suit. We have our Ace for clarity, our Two of Swords, the cross swords in front of the heart. I'm missing the water here. I'm used to seeing some water in the background of a Two of Swords. It doesn't always have to be water. I shouldn't say I always see water, but the wall is kind of throwing me. But actually that kind of makes sense, because when we're in a Two of Swords moment, we've sort of hit a roadblock. Like we can't keep going straight ahead. We've got to go this way or this way. So which way are we going to go, right? We're sort of in a rock hard place situation. So it really works the more that I talk through it. Yep, we're totally in the throes of OMG in the Three of Swords, for sure. This is a lot. I feel like it's a little bit melodramatic for the three. I feel like this is very Ten of Swords energy at the moment, but it does definitely work. We have the storminess, we have the moodiness of it. It's a difficult time, the three. So, and then we have our Four of Swords, where we get a little moment of rest, which is really, really lovely. Yeah, it's like she's kind of walked through this archway and is taking a little break here. It's quite sweet. And then the Five of Swords, you really get that sort of domineering energy here. This looks like, she looks like the evil stepmother from Cinderella right here. That's exactly what she looks like. Just, she's something about her posture. You can tell she's really like overpowering unnecessarily this girl. And there's somebody in the back who's sort of seeing this go down and is like, oh no, you know, what do I do? This is a really potent Five of Swords when you're talking about bullying energy or tyrantish energy. It's a lot. This is really interesting, and I kind of freaking love it. This is the Six of Swords, and we're moving away from whatever that challenge and difficulty was that was happening in the Five of Swords. But here, usually we see a ferryman, and the ferryman sort of almost kind of seems to get credit for getting that person away from that difficult situation. But in this one, she's guiding herself. She's got this like sword of power hovering above her hand. So magically she's powering her own way forward, or at least is very focused on where she wants to go next, what she's going to do next. And he's assisting, but he's more in the background. She's getting the credit for doing the work, you know? Here we have the Seven of Swords, and I get this feeling like she's holding these swords in this basket of fruit, and there's a bag beside her, and it's almost like she's looking at the crows going like, don't judge me, like you don't know my situation, you know? And I kind of get that vibe from this. These people over here are having this little circle, and she's obviously up to something, but we don't really know her motivations. For all we know, these were things that were already rightfully hers that had been taken from her. I like that the image leaves some doubt as to what could be going on. And then we have the Eight of Swords. This is really interesting that she's floating like this above the water. She's not, it's interesting because her eyesight is covered by this like blindfold, but I don't know. There's something about this. It's such a lovely image, but I almost want to see her able to get more easily out of this predicament. It almost looks like she's being magically suspended in the air, which is harder to see the way out than if she were just standing there and had the option to just stop, you know? So I like this. This works. We get the kind of struggle of the eight, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's something here that I would maybe want to see differently. Differently. And this is just me nitpicking because I like to do this, to think about what each card means, but it's not because I think all of the artwork is gorgeous, obviously. The Nine of Swords here is, you know, you really get this idea of discomfort, right? There's like all these swords all around them, and so they're safe, relatively speaking, but they clearly don't feel safe, and there's these bugs that seem to be like swarming around their face, and so it looks uncomfortable, right? And here we have the Ten of Swords, and what I love about this is it looks like she's either just about to pull this sword out of her chest, or she's stabbed it in there, you know? Like, did she put that in there because she's just being so like over the top upset about everything that's happened to her that she's just like adding to her own wounds? And I think this is where we get into that parable around the second arrow. I've talked about this before, and I don't know the origin of the story. It just really stuck with me whenever I heard it. I want to say it's like a Buddhist parable, but I don't know that. Please don't quote me on that. I'm literally just guessing. But essentially the parable goes, it's called the second arrow, and the premise is that the second arrow, so the first arrow is the arrow that hits you, the thing that's unpleasant or that you're struggling through, or the difficult thing, the ouchy thing. But the second arrow is what you tell yourself about that thing. So you have like double pain because you have the thing that actually happens. And then you have all your mental processing around why that happened and the ways in which you're sort of like dwelling on it or continuing to wound yourself in the process. And that's kind of what this looks like to me. And I want to see the progression again because I'm a nerd. So yes, we have all the way up in the air, and we start to see some land here. And then we're actually on the ground, and then we're actually back in the clouds. So this one shifts a little bit for me, but it's close. It's still close. Okay. Anyways, I really love the court cards in this deck. So we have our Page of Swords. I love that they've got a little satchel on their belt. It seems to be holding papers or scrolls of some kinds, that gathering of knowledge. The Knight of Swords seems to be charging upward, away from land. The Queen of Swords got her feet planted firmly on the ground. I'm just wondering if anything else stands out to me about her, but she's really beautiful. And then we have the King. I do like when the King is like sort of up in the clouds and up in the air, in the air suit specifically. I really like that. I love the snowy owl up there. It's beautiful. And then we're to the earthly suit, the Pentacle suit. Gorgeous ace. Again, these feel very Rider-Waite-Smith inspired, but they definitely also feel unique enough that I'm not bored by the imagery, you know? Love the Two of Pentacles with the juggling of the two coins, and these the squirrel and a chipmunk. I'm pretty sure I got those right. There's a little ladybug in this card. I have a thing for ladybugs. So cute. The Three of Pentacles. This feels kind of solitary, but we do have actually a fairy, and I want to say that's like a beaver maybe? I don't know, some kind of little ground creature that is helping this character to build this trellis. Beautiful. This Four of Pentacles is so great to me. We have our little badgers here, and it's like he's so holding on so carefully to his resources, to his money, that he's turned into stone. There's like a real almost Midas touch vibe to this card, which I think is really interesting. Love, love, love. The Five of Pentacles, again, feels very traditional. We've got the glowing window. They're struggling, but they're not seeing the help available to them. And then the Six of Pentacles, there's all these forest animals, and there's a person both needing her help, and she's helping both in different ways, which I think is really great. This is such a fabulous Seven of Pentacles, because this is what the Seven of Pentacles feels like for me, like on the daily, right? Like we've put in all this effort, we've been putting all this work, and we want to know how things are going to turn out, but really at the end of the day, we have to kind of just wait. But she's casting cards or throwing cards to see how it's going to go. And like, this is what I do when I'm in a Seven of Pentacles kind of space. So I just find it very relatable and awesome. And then we have the Eight of Pentacles, the sort of master continuing to perfect their work, and others are learning from them. And I like the addition of these two who are learning, and the little fairy there is awesome too. This Nine of Pentacles feels full of luxury and regality. We've got the wine and the wine barrel. Love it. And then the Ten of Pentacles, we get this feeling of really being settled and safe and cozy and home. And then we're into our quartz. We have the sweet little fairy in the Page of Pentacles. So cute with the little tulip hat. Bison with the Knight of Pentacles. Love her. The Queen of Pentacles, almost as if she's a part of the tree. So pretty. Oh gosh, okay. Anyways, and then the King of Pentacles, who literally has this Dionysus kind of vibe about him. Love it. With the wine and the gems and the figs and honey and all this kind of stuff. Really, really lovely. Okay, so let's zoom out. I want to talk a little bit about the guidebook, and then we're going to talk about the cardstock. Okay, so let's take a look. Now, this is a really meaty guidebook, but when we say that, be aware that a lot of this is formatting too, because the way these books are formatted, it's beautiful. They're beautiful guidebooks. I think any Llewellyn set just makes a really wonderful gift for somebody, like a beginner's tarot gift. They really do a beautiful job with the full color printing and all the full color artwork, so you can really see the images up close and examine them, and I love that. I think that's just a really lovely touch. So Sasha Graham is the creator and the author, and then Natasha, I'm not going to be able to pronounce her last name, from Scotland. I might be mispronouncing her first name too. Oops. Has been shortlisted for multiple awards. Her illustrations have been published in books, magazines. Yeah, her art is stunning. So these are the two behind the deck. Oh, so beautiful. Okay, so in any case, let's talk about it. So you get a bit of an introduction. Throughout this book, you will see lots of little witchy, magical tidbits. And one of those is like, here you have the rules of garden magic. Everything is energy. Nature speaks if you listen. Clear space and set boundaries. Show up and do the work. Plant seeds of desire. Cultivate when the time is right. That's the kind of thing I feel like you could definitely write in your own grimoire. And then you have a section here about tending the soil. There's a bit here about creating a tarot grimoire. And then planting seeds. Some stuff here about the witch's spiritual journey and celestial journey. They talk about the different suits. There's just some really great overview information here. Numerology, some meditative journey information. And now it sort of takes you into the deck, cultivating depth and meaning, and you get into it. Now, the first thing, well, there's two things that stood out to me right away about the guidebook that I'm going to demonstrate here in the Fool card. You get the name of the card at the top of the page, then you get a keyword. So here we have beginning, and then there is a association underneath that. So for the Fool, it's air. So the elemental association. And then there's a 4-line, what to me feels like a little spell or invocation. So here it says, fresh as sparkling morning dew, once upon a time came you. Never mind, the steps are steep. Trust your fate, take the leap. And there's something about this little poem, this little invocation that feels very witchy and magical in all of these lovely ways. You could definitely take that, and if this was your daily draw, write that in your journal or work with that as a mantra for the day. I think that really gives you something you can do with this deck on the daily that's just really powerful and lovely. So then you get a description of the card and a meaning, and upright and reversed keywords, which is great. And then there's a really interesting tidbit here at the end that says, to write the reversal, ask, How can I start over? So to me, what that says is that if, let's say, you do work with reversals and you've pulled this card in the reversed keywords are blindness, ignorance, childish, reckless, indiscreet, and irresponsible. So then to write the reversal, ask yourself, how could I start over? That's a really cool mechanic in this guidebook that I think is innovative and really fun, and I love that so much. Now, I don't read with reversals, but what I would do is if I pulled this card in, I don't know why I pulled the card when there's an image right there, but if I had pulled this card and I felt that it was being implied a negative, or it was maybe in a negative position, that sort of thing, or if I felt intuitively that it was coming up in its reversed meaning, this gives me guidance for how to turn it around. And I think that's just really, really cool. So that's how it goes throughout all of the cards. Does the exact same thing even in the minor arcana. You still get to write the reversal, you still get your invocation, and you get a keyword, and you also get that association. So in the minor arcana, you're going to get the decan association. So Mars and Pisces, for example. And then there's some gems of stuff here in the end that I really wanted to show you. So we get past the court cards, which are organized separately, which I personally really appreciate. And then it's just a little section, okay? But there's a part 4 to this book called Harvesting Magic. So this is basically a section on doing magical work with your cards. There are some spreads back here. I don't want to give it away. It's a fun surprise. If you get this deck, dip into that. And let me just see if I can give you an example without showing you all how it works. But let me just do this. So, for example, there's a spell for romantic love here, and it's utilizing the Lover's card, and also there's some other ingredients suggested, and there's also some associated spreads. The spreads in this case actually come before then. So you'll have some love and romance spreads, and then a little bit about a spell for romantic love, and then you'll have another section, say home and garden, and then there'll be a spell for the home of your dreams, etc., etc., etc. And I just thought that was a really cool, innovative approach to the guidebook. I really think this is a very well thought out set, and definitely one that I'm really enjoying. This has been the only deck I've been working with in June so far, and I'm not bored at all yet. In fact, I had to put the whole thing back in order just to make this video. So I'm really, really, really enjoying it. Now, with that said, I have a few little minor complaints, but also mostly just praise for this cardstock. I want to be really clear. Creating a mass market affordable deck, particularly one with such a heavy and full color and beautifully formatted guidebook, is not easy to do within the budget that Llewellyn has to sell this deck to you at a reasonable price. So I really, really want to be clear about that, because I am not hating on this deck at all. I just think it's important to know that to manage your expectations, I should say, about what you're going to get from this. Now, I have several decks to compare this to, but let's talk a little bit about the linen finish on this cardstock. The finish itself is fantastic, and because it has linen, so linen, if you don't know, and I should clarify, let's back up. When we say linen finish, it's not quite right. Linen is an embossing, so it's a texture on the cards. But the finish determines whether the card is going to be glossy or matte, and so that finish is applied either with a liquid coating that is then cured or dried, or a lamination, like a sheet of lamination. Now, with linen embossed cards, you have a liquid coating typically that's going to be applied. And so you don't get the extra, say, structure or thickness that you would get from a laminated card. Now, I'm pretty sure that Llewellyn standard cardstock is not laminated anyway. I'm pretty sure it's a liquid coated card, and that's fine. What I have noticed, though, is that this feels, it's got the linen, and what the linen does, I keep interrupting myself. Let me get to the point. What linen does is it creates little air pockets. Oh, look at that. I just tried to throw the whole deck. It creates little air pockets between the cards so that when you shuffle it, there's nothing to sort of grip or stick against each other. So the shuffle has a little bit of air in it, which you can probably hear in the form of a bit of a whistle when you bridge it. So you can probably hear that air, right? That's what linen does. So this is a glossy finish linen cardstock, but the paper that it's on also has an impact on how the deck's going to feel. So if I were to describe this particular linen finish deck, it would be to say that this is Llewellyn's usual cardstock with linen embossing, and other than that, it's basically the same as their normal cardstock, roughly. I would guess that this is not cord, so it's probably like a regular paper like their normal cardstock is. And so as such, what I found throughout the deck, and I mentioned this partway in when we were at some of the cards, is that because it's not a very thick paper, and that linen, I feel like, has created some spots where the cards kind of want to fold or crease a little bit along that line. Now, I'll be honest, I still really love shuffling these, and I really find them cozy and comfy to shuffle. They do really, really, really well. I still prefer it just ever so, what am I trying to say? I still prefer it a little over Llewellyn's standard cardstock. I'm trying to find some examples of this creasing. There's really not that many. There was the one I showed you when we were walking through the cards. But there's just a couple of places where if the light hits them just right, I can see it or I can feel it in the way that the card tries to kind of move or fold. And I think for that, that's just something to be aware of. You'll notice if I kind of grab the cards and put them like this, you'll see some like little bits of gapping. I think that's where you kind of have some slight movement maybe created by some of the creasing that can happen, just very light creasing. If that's the kind of thing that's going to bug you, I just think you should be aware of it, that you might have some of those imperfections on the cards. But I'm telling you, like, I just stinking love the shuffle anyways. Like, I think that linen does create a better handling experience. But my cards do have a bit of a bow this direction. So it's a lot of times whether the deck is going to bow this way or this way has to do with which side of the paper it was cut on, like which against the grain or with the grain or whatever. But that's what this deck is doing. Now, I have found the user experience of this deck to be luscious and glorious, and I love it for a Llewellyn deck. It is very much, so let me just show you an example. So here is another Llewellyn deck, and this is the Wizard's Tarot. And actually, yeah, so these are the exact same thickness as far as the paper goes. So it's the same thickness as a standard Llewellyn deck. It could actually be, I might be lying to you, it might be just ever so slightly thicker than a standard Llewellyn. Okay, so this is the Wizard. Let me feel them. Yeah, paper-wise, the paper feels the same, kind of. It pretty much feels the same, but this has the texture and this doesn't. I would venture to say that if this is 310, this might be 320, okay? Or if this is 300, this is 310. So there's probably like about a 10 gram per square meter difference, 10 GSM difference between the two. But the handling, if you already love the shuffle of a Llewellyn deck, then maybe you won't care too much whether or not it's linen, because Llewellyn decks already shuffle really nicely. But man, there's something about this that just, oh, I keep tapping my microphone, sorry. There's something about this that just feels really lovely and comfy and kind of, there's a sponginess to linen. I don't know, that's probably going to make it sound very unpleasant. But there's a little bit of a sponginess to this feeling of deck that just feels a little nicer to shuffle. And it is more of an expense for Llewellyn to do that. And I think that it's worth paying attention to if you like it or not, to see if that's something that you would enjoy in your cards or not. So that's the Llewellyn one. Now let me do a comparison with some other mass market Llewellyn so you can kind of see the difference. So this is the recently released US Games Fyodor Pavlov. Now this deck was much more expensive, as I recall, than the Witch's Garden. And the paper does feel different. So if I hold these decks up side by side, they're also a different size. Like the US Games is bigger. Llewellyn decks run just a hair shorter than a standard tarot, and the Fyodor Pavlov runs a bit bigger than a standard tarot. But hopefully you can see that these are the same. They're basically the same thickness. It's possible that they're ever so slightly different. It's really hard to tell because of this one has a bit of a bow and this one doesn't. But I will tell you that this doesn't have quite as glossy, you can see. This one's a little less glossy of a finish as this one is. You can see how the Llewellyn catches the light. So this one may have, yeah, I don't know. The linen texture isn't exactly the same either. These are probably not printed in the same way. This is more of a matte linen, and this is a real high gloss linen. So those are some differences. But if you're expecting it to feel exactly like the Fyodor Pavlov, it won't. The Fyodor Pavlov has a little bit more snap, feels a little stiffer, as US Games cardstock does tend to feel. But it's more bendy than US Games normal cardstock. So just so you can see kind of the difference there. And this one has no discernible bowing, whereas the Llewellyn one does. Just things to be aware of. But this, again, was probably, it was quite a bit more expensive if I recall. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe this one was probably at least 20% or more expensive than this one. Maybe I'm ballparking that, but I remember this being almost an indie price, and it's a really lovely deck, but I wouldn't hold this to the same standard just because they clearly didn't have the same budget to work with, right? So then let's take a look at another mass market linen finish deck, and this is the Tarot of the Divine. So this one is also in matte linen, but this one's much thicker, I believe. Let's just see if I'm right or I'm wrong here. Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. So you can see quite a difference in thickness. So the Llewellyn is going to be a thinner cardstock for sure than the Tarot of the Divine cardstock. Now this one bowed, as you can see, along that line. So again, this often has to do with where the paper was cut. So it didn't bow this way, it bowed this way. Most cardstock, especially cardstock without a core, is going to do this, but in fairness, the Fyodor Pavlov is white core or gray core, no core, whatever as well. This one is also kind of glossy, but it has almost like a plasticky feeling to it. So they're both quite shiny, I would say. This one has more of a, the Llewellyn has more of a mirror-like shine. Yeah, you can kind of see that line? Running down the card, you can kind of see the way the light bounces. That's what I mean. That kind of happens throughout the Llewellyn deck in spots. It's, for me, not a deal breaker. But if these feel very different, like this is a much thicker, heavier, oh, I keep tapping my microphone. This one's a very thicker, heavier, stiffer linen. It's not nearly as cozy to shuffle. If you had struggles shuffling the Tarot of the Divine, you're going to find this a much easier shuffle, both from its size and also just how like bendy and thin the cardstock is by comparisons. This feels very usable, but I will show you, like, I have been using this deck for a couple of weeks at the time I'm filming this. Lightly. I would say I've been lightly using it for a couple of weeks. And I've definitely got some chipping and stuff you can see along the edges. It's going to show signs of wear. Okay, so just be aware. But when we're talking about comparing mass market cardstock, linen finished cardstock, you can see there's quite a bit of differences. So don't, I guess my caution to you is don't assume that just because it's linen, it's all going to feel the same. The best quality linen cardstock you can get is, or linen texture cardstock, is if it's in a casino grade black core cardstock, linen textured, and then a finish applied that's meant to protect the cards and give them some slide. And the reality is that core cardstock, there's no way a mass market publisher can do that for a mass market price. It's not possible. So just so we manage our expectations. But I did want to show the difference in how it shuffles if you do have a higher quality one. So this is I'll show you the highest quality one that I have in my collection. It's the Playful Heart Tarot by Kitten Chops. And this is, I know to be a black core casino grade. There's something about this that feels really high quality. Like the cardstock feels very smooth. I've used this deck a ton. There's no visible chipping. It just holds up really, really nicely. It wears very, very well. And because of that core, again, the cards feel a little heavier and denser. They don't feel, you can kind of tell, like this has weight, a little more weight to it. It is a bigger deck as well. But thickness-wise, the Playful Heart Tarot isn't really that much thicker than the Llewellyn decks. It's a difference in what's in the paper and what makes it have that sturdiness. But they're both very similarly floppy and bendy, and the Llewellyn cardstock does snap back pretty well. It's going to hold a bit of a bow, at least mine is. And the only other one that I have to compare to, in case you're really curious, is a little indie deck. I'm pretty sure this was printed on a cardstock similar to the Make Playing Cards linen. And this one is probably a little thinner. Yeah, this one's a little thinner than Llewellyn, but this one is on a black core. I did a light test, so this is also feeling a little stiffer and denser in a way, a little more sturdy, no signs of chipping. But again, indie deck price. Okay, so that's the difference. I just kind of wanted to talk about it because I think it's really easy to go, ooh, linen, and get really excited, and I think that it is good. I love linen, and when I see a deck comes out linen, I go, ooh, linen myself. But just manage the expectations. Know that it won't be the same as your independent cardstock linens necessarily. I mean, indie producers can also do this exact same thing. But in this case, I think that Llewellyn did a really, really good job for what they give us for the price. So that's my long ramble on the cardstock, but I just really wanted to weigh in on it. I like it, but I don't love that little creasing thing that happens. I don't mind that my deck will show some wear. I love to shuffle it. And anybody with small hands or who just hates that really stiff, heavy, gilded cardstock, you're going to love this. I think you'll really, really, really like the way that it handles. So those are my many, many thoughts on the Tarot of a Witch's Garden by Sasha Graham, published by Llewellyn. Lovely deck. I'm really enjoying my time with it. I literally had to get this out of my bag, put it back in order to do this video. So I hope you enjoyed, and I would love to hear what you think if you have it. And if you plan on getting it, let us know in the comments down below. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. And until next time, may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye.